So, Steve, are there specific statutory penalties for boards in the event of a violation of one of these?
Yeah, I think the legislature wrestles with, on the one hand, we really want to encourage volunteers to serve. But on the other hand, we want them to stay in their lane and not make these mistakes. And so there are a few statutes that have penalties in them. So, for example, if the board doesn't properly respond to a request for inspection of records, then if somebody sues them, a homeowner is bad because, hey, you didn't get me the records within the time periods required by law, which are within 10 days or 30 days, depending on how far back the records go. The small claim judge can impose a fine of $500 for each request that's not properly handled or for attorney fees. Another example, also a $500 fine, are for violations of the Open Meeting Act. Like I said, if the agenda isn't timely posted, if a member isn't permitted to speak at a meeting, if the agenda isn't accurate as to what the board is going to be talking about. So that's another situation where there are penalties.
Now, I have a question for you about the Open Meeting Act, because I obviously, we're in COVID times right now still, and everybody's trying to use Zoom. Everybody's using Zoom for their meetings. Is that a violation?
It's such a good question. It is, actually. As you probably know, well, let me say, it is not a violation to have an electronic meeting or to have a meeting by Zoom. But the Open Meeting Act does require that there be a physical location where there is one representative of the board, could be a director, could be a manager, where a homeowner can go and be in the room and listen, to the board meeting or watch it on Zoom. I mean, that kind of makes sense in pre-COVID days, but that requirement could also collide with, the shelter-in-place orders and, the ban on gatherings. Now, there's a bill pending in the legislature to suspend that in-person requirement during emergencies, but as it stands right now, that bill has not been passed. And so, in theory, we're all, violating the law right now. I think it's very low risk. I think the harder risk will be when these COVID restrictions are relieved and boards and managers are still going to use Zoom, because so far as I can tell, everybody loves it, for a lot of reasons. So then the question is, are they going to go back to designating a location for one person to be there with a phone or a laptop? And I think they should do that.
Steve, when you say $500, are you saying $500 per board member, or is that $500 per the entire group? And does that include the community manager potentially?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So first of all, it does not include the property manager because the obligations we're talking about fall on the association, not the manager. And no, it does not include $500 fine on any particular director. The fine that I'm talking about is levied against the association. And with regard to records requests, it can be a fine of up to $500 for each request that is not properly handled. Whereas under the Open Meeting Act, it's $500 for each violation unless they're identical.